About a month ago, I was offered the opportunity to voice act for a Catholic radio play based on the adventures of Joan of Arc. I was very, very excited for this project. It was going to pay well. I was going to get the opportunity to drive out to Chicago to record, meet a bunch of people. It just seemed like a very fun, cool, engaging opportunity. Unfortunately, the production company ran into a bit of a, let's call it a kerfuffle, um, and they had to postpone the project, and so I was no longer able to do that. It was very disappointing and frankly even a little bit upsetting. So, what I do in those sorts of situations is I invoke what I call the myth of Ur. To those of you who aren't familiar with the myth of Ur, the myth of Ur is the central focus or theme of the final chapter of The Republic by Plato. The general idea of the myth of Ur is that once everyone dies and everyone is judged and gets their punishments accordingly, either wonderful heaven or terrible treacherous hell, um, all the souls get together again, and God creates a new plan for the earth and a new set of time for everyone to enact and live. And then, based upon how you did in the previous life and your judgment, you get to pick which life it is that you would like to lead. And so, they go according to straws, and everyone picks and says, "Oh, I'd like to live that life," or "I'd like to live this life," or "I'd like to live this way." And then after that, everyone dunks their head in the river Lethe, which erases their memory, and then they're put on Earth without any memory of having chosen. Now, the thing was is that it was meant to sort of underscore Plato's main theme, which was the idea that the most important thing that you should have, or the most important thing that you should practice, is discernment. The ability to choose what would be best, because that kind of seems like it would be the most important choice in your life, is the choice of what life am I going to live. But it also underscored it in another very interesting metaphysical concept, which is the idea that you are living the life currently. The life you are living is a life that you chose to live before you were living it. And so once you go into that sort of framework, looking at your life becomes a lot different, and in some ways a lot more complicated, because all of a sudden every event that happens that seems like it was out of your control means that at one point it was in your control, that you looked at it and said, well, this I might not appreciate in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, I would still like to live this life on the whole. Now, this is fascinating because if you look at what a lot of Eastern philosophers say, this I got from listening to some lectures by Alan Watts, is they believe that one of the pathways towards enlightenment and nirvana is this idea of bringing unity between that which is in your control and that which is without your control, in which case you eliminate the border between who you are, what you do, and then what happens to you. It's the same thing, because who you are, what's inside your control is part of who you are and what you do, but then also what's outside of your control is also part of what it is that shapes you and molds you and creates the life that you live, and in some ways makes it worth living. And so if you look at these two ideas, it's the idea of, well, frankly, you sort of get it in the Western Judeo-Christian tradition, which is that God has a plan for you. There is something higher than you and if you want to abstract that out as God, or if you want to abstract that out as your higher, more knowledgeable self, that thought this thing out, this life that you're living, the world that we're living in, was thought out. And not only was it thought out, there was a conclusion. You or the entity came to a conclusion that this life was worth living. And so, anytime that I'm feeling incredibly down or negative or upset that something didn't go my way, or that I missed an opportunity, or there was some giant failure, I take heart in the belief that at some point something more wise than myself decided that the life that I was living was worth living, and I choose to place my trust in that and live. This was Matthew Carnegie. Thank you very much for listening.